He's here to talk to us all about his experience. I've read something about you in terms of you had 3 strokes in 3 weeks and you're...
Yeah, one wasn't good enough. I had 3 of them. Again, Leo Costa Jr. is my name. February the 13th, 2012, I had 3 strokes in 3 weeks. And it was pretty astonishing to me simply because the business that I'm in for 33 years has been in fitness training and even to the point where I was a world-class bodybuilder. When this happened to me, I was 2 months away from one of my biggest competitions of my life. I had to come back from a 13-year layoff to do this at the age of 53. And 2 months before this show, I ended up having actually 2 strokes back to back. So what I'm going to do today is tell you my story, kind of the journey, kind of some of the things I learned, and what I think is a problem for us stroke survivors. Now I'm in that group, and I'm going to talk about a possible, in my mind anyway, a solution. So 2 months before my show, I have these 2 strokes. I didn't really know, to be honest with you, Kara and I were talking about this morning, if I knew that I was having a stroke. And I said I didn't have a clue. In fact, when this was happening to me, I was training some clients, and I had my foot up like on the bench, and I was just kind of like this. And all of a sudden, I felt kind of something weird came through my body. I just kind of knew it was different than anything I've ever felt, but I thought maybe it's just, may have been my denial. I thought maybe it's just like a flu or something like that, And so I kind of stood up off the bench, I put my foot down, and I couldn't find the floor with my foot, like searching around for it. I thought that's awfully weird. And then all of a sudden, it was my hand that was on the bench, fell off the bench. Things just started progressing at that point. Still didn't know what it was. Still in denial, hoping for the best. I just thought, I'm just going to... But anyway, long story short of that is I ended up, I finally just felt like I needed to get home. I probably shouldn't have driven, but I drove home. It's about 10 minutes away, 10 miles away or something like that. But as I was driving, I could feel that things were just really progressing now. My vision was going. By the time I got to my house and, got inside the house, I crashed to the floor. Still was in denial. Finally, my wife said, you got to get to the hospital. So I did. That was the good news. I got there within 4 hours. So when I was, in there in emergency, the doctor had mentioned to me that there was this clot busting treatment called TPA. Have you heard of that? Yeah. And at that point I'm paralyzed on my right side. Couldn't talk very well. Couldn't see. And unfortunately, I had to have my kid sign because I told him, I said, at that point, I thought, I don't want to be like this. I'd rather take the chance, even though the doctor said there's a 30%, I think 3 out of every 15 or every 30 people, I think is what he said, they end up bleeding out, so you could die from it. There's always consequences when you do something like this, a trade-off. But for me, it was worth it. And the doctor said, if it works, in 2.5 days, you could walk out of the hospital like nothing ever happened, which is exactly what happened. Amazingly, I went on a Thursday. By Sunday, I walked out and I was totally fine. The doctor had told me when I was in there, and of course they run all these tests on you, and they said, well, according to all the scans that we did, you shouldn't be here. And yet, he didn't mean that necessarily that I could have died, which I could have. He didn't mean it that way. He just said, there's nothing, there's no carotid arteries, that we did the ultrasound, so then that was kind of a weird question, or a weird statement. I'm thinking, well, why the heck am I here, Anyway, so he goes, look, no more bodybuilding for you. I don't advise it because that sport, it's by its nature, it's based on extreme behavior. You're always pushing your body to the max, to the limits. In that case, because what we try to do is put on muscle, so we're always pushing the envelope that way. And it's very hard on your physiology. So he said, I don't recommend that you go back to work for 4 to 6 weeks, and definitely no bodybuilding. And that was a very hard pill for me to swallow because I've been competing all my life. I've been an athlete all my life. So when he told me that, you know, in my stubbornness and my denial, I thought, he must not be talking to me. He must be talking to the average person. And so I went home on Sunday, and I thought, you know, I felt really good Monday when I woke up. And so I said, I rationalized, I said, I'm just going to go back to work, because I owned my own business for a long time, fitness studio. I went back to work, and I rationalized that what I would do is just really, I wouldn't bodybuild. I was not going to do that, because I could really understand that when it was doing my body. But I thought, I'm just going to come back and just do this, my training, just very modify it way down. Fitness, you know, compared to what I was doing, it was way less. So that's what I did. I started, you know, worked out. I had clients at the time. I had a workload, but I just reduced it way down. I was just working maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. It seemed to be going okay. You know, I thought, oh, it's okay. Maybe it wasn't just, maybe I was right. Until about 3 weeks to the day that the first 2 happened, I had my third one. I was training a client. This time I knew what it was. It was a repeat of what I had felt, you know, the 2 weeks before. And once again, I probably did something I shouldn't have. Drove back to the hospital, and I went into the emergency. I mean, I parked perfectly and everything. You know, I could feel this thing going on. And I walked in the window and knocked, you know, hey, I'm having my third one. And that's when my whole world got turned upside down in a very big way. Because now the very same thing happened. I was paralyzed on my right side, but the doctor told me the bad news is this time you can't do the TPA, that clot busting treatment, because it's too soon. You have to wait like 3 months before you can do that again. So I had to do this from scratch, rehab the whole thing from scratch. And it was a really big eye opener, to say the least. I mean, I was in shock. Once again, the doctor said, you shouldn't be here. They did all these MRIs. Here I was. So, long story short, I was in the hospital probably for about 4 days, and then I was released to go home. I didn't have a physical therapy with a physical therapist for a couple weeks. They said, we're going to send you home, you know. And to be honest with you, and there wasn't really much instruction for me, other than just to go home and rest and all that, you know. So when I'm home, I had a lot of time to think. I did not go back to work. I was now pretty in big shock as to what just happened to me. What made it bigger was the fact that being in the sport that I was in, especially, and being an athlete, I've been connected to my body my whole life. Bodybuilders at the level I was at, we know exactly what to do and connect with our body. And here I was, disconnected. I found it to be a very odd feeling when I was in bed, and I didn't know where my limbs were. That's strange, you know. Of course, we learn how to use all of our functions and everything as when we're young, and we're not really aware, actually, that we're developing all these fine motor skills and all that kind of stuff, you know. So that was really odd. So I had to come up with a game plan, and just by my own curious nature of being in the sport that I was in, what I knew I had to do was I had to research. Now I had to dig into this thing and find out what kind of animal I was up against, this stroke thing, you know? And that's exactly what I did. It's about educating, and we're going to talk about that later on. This is about now, all my life I've been educating people on how to get in shape, how to eat. Now it's time for me to educate myself on what I had to do so I could arm myself with the best tools I could. The first thing I did was I wanted to find out like the data, the numbers, stroke recovery, how many people are having them. And I was surprised to find out there's 800,000 people roughly in America that are having the strokes every year, every single year. And so I went further into that, and this is where I started becoming rather really curious at this point, because then I realized that 10% of the 800,000 people are almost making 100% recovery. I found that awfully low. You know, I have nothing to compare this to, mind you. I'm just learning about this. But just 10%, I thought, well, that seems like it should be a better recovery rate. And then I started learning some more that every 40 seconds, hello.
Hello, sorry.
That's okay. Every 40 seconds in the US, someone's having a stroke, and every 4 minutes, someone dies from a stroke. And 80% of all this is preventable. So there's some stuff there that, you know, so, but the thing that bothered me the most was the only 10% making a full or almost a full recovery. That just didn't seem good enough. So anyway, at least I knew what I was up against. So I had to start from being at home because the doctor said stay at home, so I did. And I did not, you know, I knew, from my background, I knew that I didn't have to have any kind of weights, you know, and you don't really, not that much. I mean, you do have to have some resistance, but in my case, it was more about, I call it doing body through space type of exercises. I had to retrain my body how to walk again, and use my arm and hands again, and to talk again. Those were my three things I had to deal with. In my case, the most impaired part of my body was my arm. I couldn't move it at all. And so I started there. I wanted to do the hardest thing first. So that's what I did. And that's when I started correlating a lot of what I was doing actually to bodybuilding. There's some similarities here. And one of them was caregivers. And I realized that my caregiver, in this case, was my wife. And caregivers, obviously, are very important to the overall success of your rehab. It's kind of the same as me having a training partner for bodybuilding. I always had training partners. They were basically caregivers, in a way. Okay. Now, the thing that I learned that was also very important as a caregiver, because I had to instruct my wife is in the same, she's in the fitness business too, so she kind of understands this. But I thought the real importance of a caregiver is real tricky. Is that part of the thing that they have to do is, you know, push you on and encourage you, but not to the point where they're doing the work for you, where they become an enabler. That's real tricky because then, you know, we start getting lazy a little bit and we start relying on someone else. So, but without her and without my support group, and she was my main support group really, because I stayed at home. When something like this happened to me, and if any of you know, bodybuilding mentality is that we're vain about our bodies and we're narcissistic. I mean, that's just kind of the way we are. That's us. So for me to be jacked up like this, no one was going to see me. I was too big. So I thought, well, that's okay. I'll just stay at my house. I can do this, you know. So my initial therapy that I started with was actually all at my house, and I did not go outside. I went in the backyard, and I would do things like walk, and I just practiced walking, and you know, because I had drop foot. And do you guys know what that is, drop foot?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nerve damage in your leg from the stroke. And when you walk, your foot drops like that. You don't have a smooth gait when you're walking. It's always dropping like that. Really odd. So I had to work on stuff like that. And my sport really helped me, bodybuilding really helped me because of the intuitive or instinctive training that we always implement. And I knew that, I figured, okay, what do I have to do in order to my ultimate goal has always been from the beginning, 100% recovery. That's just the way it is. Now, does that mean that we're going to make 100% recovery? No, there's no guarantees on that, but that's what I was shooting for. That was the only thing I was shooting for. So, you know, I just, you know, when I was doing my training, for example, I'm going to go back in and start with the arm. I had my wife come in, and I would sit down in a chair. What we learned in bodybuilding was that, and again, we learned this, and we just had blind faith that this worked, was the value of mind and muscle connection. And when you're training in bodybuilding, what you're trying to do, when you do, for example, when you're doing a curl, is every time that you make that movement, you want your mind to connect to that movement, to make every part of the movement efficient. It's the difference between training the muscle and just weightlifting. Weightlifting, a lot of times you see people are cheating and they're really taken away from what they should be doing. So I took that very same approach. And again, I never really had firsthand experience because we just assumed that when we were learning in bodybuilding and through physiology that this was happening. Well, I found this out firsthand. The other thing that we know about physiology is that your body, it's called the fight or flight nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and it does certain things just by its own nature. Your body is always trying to adapt to its environment, whether it be an exercise environment, whether it be a work environment. Your body does that because it's always trying to adapt. It's a coping mechanism, so you can deal with a stressful work life. Okay, in this case, it's dealing with the stress of exercise. That's all it is. It's no different. And what we know about that, the way the physiology works, is that if you do the very same routine for 21 days in a row, your body starts adapting to that stimulus. In other words, it starts hitting a plateau. That's natural. That's what your body is supposed to do. So I just kept that in mind. So I had the mindset of a bodybuilder, but I had to modify it now to a stroke recovery survivor. Okay, but I still had that. So what I had my wife do is that she would come in and I would sit down and I would have her from a straight arm position. I would have her just lift, she'd sit right next to me. I'd have her just raise my arm like a curl, like this. I couldn't do it myself, but all I was doing at this point was watching. I was making my mind watch the body actually do the movement. Not connected, totally disconnected. Okay? Every morning she would come in and we would do this, about 10 repetitions. And you know what I found really odd, and this is the doctor told me, because you don't realize what a stroke does to you. It assaults your body and your brain. It really does. I mean, to the point where, I could only do sometimes like 1 or 2 movements, and I was shot. It was amazing, and I realized that this is really some serious stuff. So she would just come in and whatever. Well, let me tell you something. And this is when I knew that I had a legitimate shot at getting back. At about 21 days, all of a sudden, it's kind of like, have you ever been where you just know something? I knew around 21 days that I could move my arm. I just knew it. It was just something very odd. And sure enough, I just told her, I said, today I'm going to try this myself. And that's when my arm started moving. It started working for me. And then I knew I have a shot, because that's exactly how a normal physiology works. That's how it adapts. So I knew that there were things still there. I just had to retrain my body. And the thing that's really important to understand is that repetition is the mother of skill. Over a period of time, you do repetitions and your body will adapt to that, providing that you don't, like in the bodybuilding world, that you don't overtrain it. In other words, you don't do too much work. But if you don't do too much work and let your body recover from the things that you do, well, then it's going to adapt. That's what it does. That was my system telling me that it's working. But it was really odd, because then when this happened, then I could actually feel my brain. It's almost like it was sending a signal to the muscle, but there was a delay. And then all of a sudden, I could almost feel it traveling down from my brain to my body. And then as I kept doing the repetitions, then all of a sudden the connection was happening sooner. Now, to this day, this happened to me 39 months ago. To this day, I'm not 100% recovered. Most people can't really tell. But what I'm really, and which is good news after all these months of getting results, is that what's happening right now for me is that the fine motor movements are really starting to happen now. A physical therapist told me when I was in the hospital, he was right on. He says, your body is going to heal from the middle, the inside, out, and down. And he was right. I mean, that's just how my body was doing that. And so 39 months later, I'm still making recovery. This is great news for me. Listen, like most of us want stuff now. We want immediate gratification. It just doesn't happen. And the reason why I bring this up is because what I found as I'm talking to people is that I think that some people don't continue to make the recovery because they give up. Because this thing beats you down. It really does. It gets you depressed. I've never been more frustrated. And, it just knocks you on your feet, because it's awake every day you're dealing with this thing. And one day, it will be, I can do one day I can do it. The next day, couldn't do it. what's up with that? You know, I mean, that's mind blowing. I could see how people, and this is where I think my sports background really benefited me, because we're used to persevering in the adversity of trying to get better at something, trying to perfect something, right? So I could really see after this happened to me and talking with people, because that's all I've done is, you know, I want to learn now about everything and from people. And I could see how something like this could beat them down and they would give up. I could see that, because I almost felt like doing it myself. But I ran across some information. Have you heard of Malcolm Gladwell? He's an author. He's written Outliers, Tipping Point. Well, he kind of coined the term or the phrase, the 10,000 hour rule. And that means that there's a lot of things that you can do in 10,000 hours where you can become a master. Not everything, because of new research that's out, it doesn't apply across the board. But in many cases, and this is actually applies here, that in 10,000 hours you can become a master. But you got to think about that. I thought that as very positive, because even though that's going to be a lot of hours to get, you know, to master this, and the good news is that your body is adapting along the way. That put things into a total perspective for me, because I'm sitting there wanting it now. And part of that thinking was making it worse for me, because of the fact I was not getting it now. It would make me mad, and it didn't do anything good for me. All it did was set me back. You understand? So when I realized, hey, this is going to take a long time, and I'm okay with that as long as I can keep getting results. It put things into a different perspective. Okay? So again, this is a part of me learning and applying what I'm doing to my recovery. So again, I just kept, and this kind of applied to the rest of the body parts, I just kept taking baby steps to my recovery. Because then I realized that any little thing that when I had a result, even though it was small, then I started putting it into the perspective that was a really big thing that just happened to me. Even though it was just the matter of my finger maybe working now all of a sudden, that I didn't do yesterday or the day before. And the other thing I started learning about, which is fantastic, was I got really, you know, we get really emotional now, or I did. After this happened to me, I was a basket case. I would cry at the drop of like American Idol, like a backstory or something like that. You know, it didn't take much. I mean, I never did that. That was so weird to me. And when it first happened, the way that I perceived that, I thought, oh God, I'm weak. This is great. I'm weak. Now I'm crying at the drop of a hat. But then what I learned about when I got really extra emotional, every time that happened to me, there was a breakthrough. There was a breakthrough, amazingly. Now I look forward to getting emotional, that extra emotion, because I know there's something coming up. It's just a matter of thinking, you know? It changes everything, right? So again, I kept learning, and I just kept applying this. So what I ended up doing is that for about the first 4 weeks, I did my house training, if you will. I did this arm thing, and I did things like some other things, some non-traditional things, like mirror therapy. I don't know if you heard about mirror therapy. And this is where when you have a body part that's not working like I did, what I did is I sat in a chair, put a mirror between my legs, so I'm like this. There's a mirror here. I put the arm that doesn't work, because it wasn't working at that time very well. On this side, my brain, or my body, my eyes were watching the mirror, not my hand, the one that didn't work. So while I did a curl looking at the mirror with my good hand. Your brain doesn't know which hand you're doing that's working, that's training. You're tricking it. It's a way to trick that. They actually use mirror therapy for weight loss and various things, but this is one of the things that you can use mirror therapy for example. See, so what I was doing, looking for, because my bodybuilding, I was always looking for something different, which we'll talk about. So anyway, so I started training like this, and I started getting better, and my walking improved outside. And then what I did for my speech was, because I couldn't say a lot of words that I used to, and I still have every once in a while with certain words, I get twisted up a little bit, you know. But again, repetition being the mother of skill. One of the things I learned about, I was singing my ABCs in the house. I just started singing my ABCs loud as I could, and really concentrating on every letter. And what I learned from doing that, a couple things, because what I developed after the stroke is a little bit of a stutter. You know, just, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't, I never did that before. And I figured it had to do with the stroke. And when I sang my ABCs, I didn't stutter. You know how those guys sometimes they stutter, but when they can sing a song perfectly? Okay, I learned that. So I started singing my ABCs every day. And what I focused on was not the stutter. I focused on the articulating every letter. Because I found that when I did that, I guess because I wasn't focusing on it so hard, you know how sometimes you can maybe try too hard? Well, I think that's what I was doing. So when I was singing, it did something to loosen me up. And all of a sudden I was able to articulate all the letters. Okay? So I did that. The other thing I did, I'm Portuguese, and I speak the language. I couldn't roll my R's, and there's just a lot of things I couldn't do anymore with my tongue. So I decided to start speaking my language again. And I took myself back to school with an app. That's nice technology. And I just started speaking my language again. All I was doing there was forcing my body to have to make shapes that it wasn't used to. And from the repetition of doing that, all of a sudden I can roll my R's again. And I can say words that I couldn't say. It was unbelievable what was going on. So I did that for my speech. And then I thought, okay, I'm ready to take the next step. Mind you, I was in the house. If I had to go to the doctor or whatever, I mean, it was from my house in the car, doctor, back in the, you know. But then I got to the point where I said, I also realized that if I did not get out of the house and start doing the things that I did prior to my strokes, that was not going to be a good thing for me, because I knew I'd be very unhappy. There was too much pain attached to that, and I knew that. So I thought, I have to go on now and take another step out. My step out was to, again, keep in mind, I'm very vain and narcissistic. I'm gonna go walk on the street in my neighborhood. That's all I'm gonna do. You know something? I broke out in a sweat over that, to be honest with you. But I knew I had to do that. So I did. I got outside, and all I did was I started walking. And I'm walking, I'm thinking, I picture the neighbors like watching me, and they're in the window, and you know, what happened to him? You know what I mean? I feel weird about that. But that's telling, because, you know, I mean, what I've run across here is people are, when they're left up to their own devices to go out to these gyms to kind of rehab themselves, it's intimidating. They don't want to do that because they think, hey, people can tell, or, you know what I mean? That's a tough deal. So I can understand that. And I could understand that from also just training the clients that I come into the gym. It's intimidating to go into another environment like that. This is no different for me. So I'm walking. And then what I learned about that was, you know, the road looked really, I live on a nice street, it's smooth. So I thought, until I started walking. Then all of a sudden I'm walking, I'm like tripping over things. Then I realized that that road is really not that smooth. It goes like this a little bit. Everything that I'm doing at that point is manual. See, when you're growing up, your body is making all these adjustments for you. We're not even aware of the fact. It's already identified that there's a bump in the road, and it makes all the adjustments for you. Whereas now, it's not doing that at this point, 4 weeks out. And I realized that what I had to do is before I would, you know, then I had to just really think before I would make the step. Kept applying the same thing that I'm talking about, repetition. I kept doing that, and all of a sudden my body started making the adjustment. So I guess the moral of the story sort of is, again, you just got to keep on practicing until you perfect this. And I found out little things like with my drop foot. I started wearing, and I found this out one day when I was walking, and I had my sandals on, my little flip-flops. Well, you know how they flip when you take a step, flip, flip. Well, one side wouldn't flip because of that nerve damage. And I thought to myself, this is exactly the shoe that I have to wear in order to try to train my body to fire those muscles again. And it started working. I have a little bit, when I get tired sometimes I notice some of these things kind of come back. But it's getting better because I'm adapting, I'm adapting to a new level of stress as I continue to exercise and improve this. But you know, after a certain amount of time, all of a sudden, that started working, and I realized that little subtle differences like putting on different shoes made a difference, because they don't all fit the same on your foot. Because for the longest time when I'd walk, my heel would drag, and so I started finding out that if I would just wear a different shoe, kept rotating my shoes, it kept forcing me to keep adapting, and it got my mind into automatic. Where when I put that shoe on now, I don't have to think about it. Okay, so I just kept training myself like that. I call that, when I started going out like this in public, I came up with the acronym PIP, P-I-P, practice in public. So I told myself, I'm going to go PIP today. So I go out, and that's what I did. Then I kept taking more baby steps. I knew that I had to get back to the way I was. So I did that. And I started going like downtown to the bank, and just because then what I learned was confidence plays a big role here. When I'm confident, and just in general, when people are confident, they perform better. And I found when I was out in public, I get really tense, and everything that I had would start tensing up, and I wouldn't respond the same. So that was an exercise for me to learn how to deal with fear and make that fear now something that didn't destroy me, but it was something that I could use to define me. Because I've said, and I wrote, I digress just a hair. When I was learning all this stuff, I was documenting. And I ended up writing a book about this because it was a way for me to deal with the pain and the stuff that I was going through. It was an outlet for me. Well, you don't know sometimes if something bad that happens to you is bad or if it's kind of mixed and it actually becomes good. The bottom line is I ended up writing a book that got published by a big publishing house in New York. It's coming out here at the end of September, and it's called 3 Strokes in 3 Weeks Saved My Life. So I ended up writing this book, and anyway, so this fear thing, I had to learn how to deal with this stuff, and I kept facing that. In my book, I talk about, adversity either is going to destroy or define you. It's your choice. You have a lot to say about that. And I knew that I also, when I was younger, I used to rodeo. I used to break horses, ride broncs, that kind of thing. And my dad always told me, when you get bucked off, you got to get back on that horse right away, because if you don't, it's going to start messing around with your head, and you're going to start getting scared and fearful. I never forgot that. This stroke for me, it bucked me off my life for a while. I mean, I was bucked up, so that's why I kept coming back and doing the things. Yeah.
What non-traditional therapy did you do?
Yeah, I'll get to that. And so, I knew that I had to get back. Facing the fear was one of them. Okay. What she's talking about is some of the non-traditional therapies that I did. Traditional therapies would be physical therapy, my weight training. That's all pretty traditional therapy. Some of the non-traditional therapies I did, and I touched on one of them, but I did light therapy. I found some research and non-traditional stuff that's being done out there, and it's putting on these. I put on these sunglasses that were like bright yellow, and they had a strobe in them. Now, because of my stroke happened on the left side, so I had the strobe light. I go in 3 times a week to do this, and there'd be a strobe light that would hit right here, and what that did was it affected the left side of my brain. The whole point of some of this non-traditional therapy that I do was to reduce the inflammation in the body.
What's a strobe?
Like a strobe light. It goes like this.
Oh,
a light that goes like that.
light?
A blinking light. Yeah.
Okay.
So they have this in the glasses right here, and it was strobing. And because I had it on this side, it had to be on the right side. If it would have been the other way, they would have strobed me over here. So I was doing that 3 days a week. And again, the whole point of what I was doing here was to reduce the inflammation in my body. So I did it through the strobe light. I did it through oxygen therapy, oxygen where you hook up oxygen to your nose, and there's a machine that was pumping oxygen into my body. And again, the oxygen, what it does, it brings down and it brings your body back into what's called a parasympathetic state, where your body can recover. That's the only way that it can recover. If it's always inflamed, we knew this from training, if it's always inflamed, you can't recover. So this is what this was doing. So you have oxygen therapy, you have light, the strobe light therapy. I did IV therapy. I would go to a doctor. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
We have patients at home.
Oh, okay. No.
Thank you so
Sorry.
much.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Carry on?
Yep.
Okay.
Carry
Okay,
on.
oxygen, IV therapy. Now I was going to a doctor, we have a doctor, and they do this here quite a bit in the LA area, but I had a doctor in my area that he would make up a cocktail of amino acids, glutathione, alpha lipoic acid, and what he did is he would hook me up my vein, and it would be like a drip, and this would drip into my system. And one of the big benefits of that is that unlike when you take supplements, supplements have to go through a breakdown in your body. It goes through your liver and then your stomach, and you've got these enzymes breaking all this down. And by the time it ends up at the cell, you don't really get 100% of that. A lot of times it's like 30%. Well, when you take an IV like I was doing, that goes directly right into the cell. I mean, you feel it right away. And again, the cocktail that I was using was to pull out heavy metals. I even took an IV therapy that was to reduce plaque, because it's very important to keep that out of your body so you don't have this again, right? So I did IV therapy. So now I was doing strobe light, oxygen therapy, IV therapy. I did this mirror therapy. And then, one of the other things that I was doing, I don't know if this is really very non-traditional, but there's this, they call it, I think, a workout pad. What do they call that the other day? It's a foam
The
pad.
yoga pad.
Yoga, it's like a foam cushion, if you will. And what I would do for balance, because balance was an issue for me. Was it for you guys as well? Balance? Yeah. And one of the things that I did every day was stand on top of that pad, because just that unstableness, it was forcing my body to have to adjust to all this stuff that was going on underneath me. And I finally would get good at that. And then I would do things like just simply changing, just by closing my eyes, change the whole thing. It's dramatic. All of a sudden I closed my eyes and I'd be all over the place. But I kept doing it. I would, only be able to do that maybe when I first got on there, maybe 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 3. It didn't matter. I did as long as I could, and then I just come back and keep practicing. That helped my balance tremendously. And then when that got easy, then I'd start like picking up one foot. Because when you pick up one foot like this, what you're doing is you're changing the stability. This is easier. It's easier to stand on your feet this way because you have a wider base than it is this way. This gets harder. Now, to make it even harder, go over your toe. To make it the hardest, you raise it up. You see what I mean? Yeah. So I went through those progressions because that kept forcing my body to adapt to a new level of stress. So that was non-traditional therapy. Okay, so what I learned is that I really believe that these non-traditional therapies really help my recovery. The other thing that I did was changing my diet. Now, I always pretty darn good because of the sport that I was in, but I actually changed my diet to reduce inflammation. That's a big thing now. Gluten and all these things that actually inflame the body, that's real. And so what I did is I just made some adjustments. Basically, what I've done now compared to what I did before is I eat more fruits and vegetables, especially vegetables, and that's helped. So changing my diet around. At the time when this happened to me, when I had my strokes, I was because of my sport, I was 300 pounds, if you can believe that.
300?
Oh yeah, but that's what we call that getting an off-season condition. You get 300. I'd get up to 300 pounds. It was muscle, and then right before a show, 4 months out, then I start dieting for the show. So you put this muscle on, but what you net out, isn't 300 pounds. I come in 50 pounds lighter, and so I dropped. I had also as a part of what I had to do was reduce or eliminate the risk factors, and that's when I learned about those too. The number one reason people have strokes, according to what I've learned, is high blood pressure, chronic. So the minute I reduced my body weight, well, my blood pressure automatically came down. I knew as an athlete every year that I did this, because I competed for 15 years. And I knew that there was the risk that I was taking. Risk reward. I was willing to take the chance. Well, so I dropped weight. I dropped 80 pounds. And I've been there ever since. So I'm eliminating that risk factor. I changed my diet around. I've changed my whole life around in terms of how I think about things and respond to things now. Because by nature, when I get on to something that I like, I just go all or nothing. That's good and bad news if you don't control that. That's what you call extreme behavior, and that can take you over the edge. So I had to learn how to, do that and be more moderate in my approach. And when I still work like crazy. I love it. I love it. This is my calling, by the way, now. Ever since this has happened to me, bodybuilding was something I did that I was really into, and I've always been into helping people get in shape. Ever since this has happened to me, this is what my calling is now. Because, I have bigger goals now. But, so reduce the risk factors. I mean, when it came down to the question was, well, how did this happen and why did it happen to you if you shouldn't have been there? Because when I went to my cardiologist, I wanted a full workup done on me. This is like just not too long ago because I had a hernia. By the way, I never had a hernia training with weights. I had a hernia from rehabbing my body with no weights. I strained so much I got a hernia. So before they would do the hernia surgery, they wanted me to get a full workup because of the fact that I had 3 strokes. And because of the fact that I was 50 when I had it just a year ago, 59, 58, something like that. So I did that. And once again, they said, hey, they did the nuclear, and they said, but if you want to be really definitive about the results, do this angiogram. That'll tell your arteries in your heart, because they said according to the information prior to the angio, they said you have an enlarged heart, slightly. But they said it could be from just being an athlete since I was 8 years of age. Or it could be that maybe there's some blockage, because your arteries in your head, you have way more arteries, they're smaller than you do like in your neck. The carotid, they're bigger, but these are smaller. And it could, so I wanted to know, now, good or bad, I wanted to find out. And they went in, and he said, the doctor gave me probably some of the best news I had heard in a long time. He said, in my opinion, you're not going to die from heart disease because you're clear. I mean, that made me feel really good. And I really felt that part of the reason that happened was because of the changes that I made. The IV therapy, the weight reduction, changing my diet. You can change how your body ends up and performs, okay? I'm lucky because of my background. I knew how to do that, do this, which leads me on to the bigger picture for me. So anyway, those are some of the things that I did, to get from where I was, and that's why I wrote the book. I had to find out how in the world did I get from here to over here where I'm paralyzed. I had to find out. That's why I wrote the book. I didn't know it was going to be a book, but that's why I wrote that. So then I thought, okay, now I want to, after this happened to me, I realized that as I'm talking to people about this, that's when I started discovering that I think people are giving up too soon. I think they're just not informed enough. Because that's the deal. That's when I first started my fitness business 33 years ago, women stayed away from the gym at that particular time to do weight training. They'd go in and do aerobics, but they were afraid to do the weight training because they thought they were going to turn into a man. Well, that's just not so. So what I did it was about education. I knew that wasn't the case. So I went out and started speaking, especially to the women's service groups, because at that time in my business I had 80% men, 20% women that were coming in. But I wanted to educate the women on this, so I did that. That's what I did. I went around and educated. Well, now it's the other way around. 80% of my clients are women and 20% are men. Okay, so education works. We know that. And so I decided that in this case, I wanted to go out and start educating people about strokes and my story. So that's what we started doing. We went ahead and we did a couple things here. We developed a website that's called EOSA, E-O-S-S-A. It's EOSA.org. And what it stands for is Educational Online Stroke Support Association. The whole point of that website is to bring awareness from a lot of different places. My goal is to get more people on board on the same page and talking the same language. Because when I go to my cardiologist, and I'm certainly not condemning or in any way my doctor, he's a great doctor. But when he asked me, how did you get yourself back to this point? And I told him about this, what I was doing, including the non-traditional therapy. He said, I had no idea that was going on. And I started thinking, well, if he doesn't know, because he's trained in a certain area, if he doesn't know that, then how can he really help his patients? Really help, to get the most out of it. I started thinking that. And I started thinking, then I thought, okay, so then we're going to develop this association to get everybody on board. We have a blog that you can go to. There's a chat room, so we can start talking with each other about what's going on and what's happening to us. We can share that. Information is powerful. And we have videos of me showing you exercises and the things I did to rehab. We have a newsletter. We have nutrition. We have a spot for a stroke survivor of the week or the month. It's the month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have places where you guys can come on and sort of say, hey, this is what I would like to know about. And we can address that. Okay, so that's my way of starting to, I came up, and then, so I go out and do my first talk. This is my 5th one now, presentation. I've been all around all the hospitals and support groups up and down California. Man, has it been an eye-opener. I am learning so much. And when I had my first talk, I thought, this is what I'm calling the big disconnect. I just really felt that because of the lack of information and the other stuff that's out there, and because we're not all talking the same language, we're not giving ourselves the best chance to get recovery. Well, I know as a coach and a trainer that in order to get an athlete or a person to be at their very best, you got to put them in the best spot to do that. Well, this is the same thing. If I'm not putting you in the best spot to recover, you're not going to get the recovery that you should. That's just the bottom line. So I want to get this, so I'm going out here and I'm finding, okay, now I'm seeing what's going on with some of the people I've talked to. They said, well, my insurance only covered so much of the to get rehab. And then my doctor wrote me a prescription and they said, you go, if you want to your own gym. And so they were up to their own devices to do this, essentially, unless they had the money to pay for a guy like me, personal trainer. Well, in the cases that I've seen so far, a lot of them couldn't do that. So, and I'm starting to understand, now the numbers are starting to make sense to me. Why only 10% are recovering? There's the problem for me. So we're attacking this problem. I'm going to tell you something. I'm really, really upset about this whole thing, to be honest with you, because I'm hearing the same thing over and over again. And I just really feel that, I'm in this group now, the stroke survivors, thank goodness. I really think that our group has been underserved. And that might be a strong opinion, but it's my opinion. I just think that we have just not been given a fair shot at this like we should. My goal is to be the voice for this group. Me, you, okay? I want to be that person to stand up for us and say, wait a minute. Now, there's some good programs out there. So I'm learning that like at the JC level, there's some adaptive therapy training that you can go to at some of these places. There's one in Santa Rosa. I was just at speaking.
What's JC?
Junior college.
Oh, okay.
Yesterday we were at Cedar Sinai, and one guy told us about at the junior college around here. So they have programs like that, but I didn't know about that, And it's free. That's good news. Now you can get a physical therapist that can help you. A lot of people no one ever mentioned that to me until just 1 or 2 groups ago. So we want to get everybody on board. And what's happening now is creating interest, because I'm going to make a lot of noise. I can do that really well. Because in noise and strength in numbers is going to get stuff to change. I think that what has to happen, and it's starting to happen, the head cardiologist for the Johns Hopkins cardiac unit, which I guess is considered, I'm told, one of the best cardiac units in the world, maybe arguably, but that's what they think. The head cardiologist wants to be our medical advisor. He sees the value in what I'm talking about. And I want to take it a step further. I think that, because I'm in the trenches here with you guys, I'm finding out what's really going on. And we want to bring like insurance companies on this and say, look, here's what's going on here. These people are getting cut loose too soon. This is not working. I mean, look at the numbers. We're trying to, this is a tall tale, I know that, to do this, but we're getting the right kind of people, especially with the doctors coming on, that want to be a part of this. They see the value in this. So that's what we're doing, is creating this EOSA. And I would tell you that you can go to our website, for free to take a look and see all the information that we're, and I would, listen, one of the things that you have to do in order to get better as well is be proactive. You have to take responsibility for your own results. If you don't know the questions, you go ask. That's being proactive. Okay? In this case, I'm telling you, I think that with all this information that we have on our website, it's worth, if you have a computer, it's worth taking a look at. Now, if you want to be a member, I'm going to charge you, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to charge you $1 a week. Okay? I think it's going to be well worth that. It's going to take money to do what I'm going to have to do here to get this thing to get changed. So we're going to say, I'm sorry, oh, EOSA, do you have any cards, Karen?
We ran out of those
Okay,
yesterday.
EOSA, EOSSA, 2 S's. That's okay. EOSSA.org. There you go. So, like I said, if nothing else, go look for yourself and see. If you, we'd love, because my goal is to now get as many members, because when I take that list of members and say, look, insurance company, here's what's going on here. These people we're fed up with this. You know, we have to change it. Here's all the people that really think the same way. That's how we're going to make a difference. Okay? And so, if nothing else, just please go look at it. If you want to join us, we'd love to have you. We're going to make it. We're going to make a difference. I guarantee you that, because this is my new bodybuilding. And when I get into something like this, I don't stop until I get the result that I'm looking for. So that's going to happen. And I want to be your voice. I really do. That's what I want to do. Anyway, so that's our website. We feel I feel that this is part of the solution, not all, because my big dream would be to have a specifically like a stroke recovery place that you come to. This would look what you would do when you came into my place. There would be a doctor. There would be a registered nurse, so she could do the IV. There would be a physical therapist. There would be a clinical psychologist to deal with people that are having problems, with depression. So when you came into my place, you're going to come in, Mrs. Jones, and today we're going to do a little strobe light therapy, a little oxygen therapy, a little traditional physical therapy. That's what my place would look like. It would look nothing like the places I have now. Everything that I have now is based on personal training, fitness, and I work with athletes. It wouldn't look like that. You would be able to come into an environment like this. The intimidation factor, I promise you, is going to go down, because you're around people. Just, you know what I mean? It just improves that. When you come in, you'll be working with a person each time to get the kind of training that you want. So that'd be my big goal. That to me would keep closing the gap. Okay. And then I guess what really needs to happen is to get the government and find some money out there that's nonprofit to offset that for the people that can't afford doing this. I got a big job to do. And I need you guys. We all need to do this, kind of go in the same direction.